Good morning. I am here today to speak to you about an issue that is gratefully impactful to me, autism. As some of you may know, it is Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month. After I volunteered to speak here, but before I had finished writing this discussion, I realized something. I'm not the best person to talk to about all of you about this. Yes, I have autism, but as the saying goes, once you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Everyone experiences autism differently. I could talk to you about my own experience, but that only reflects me. I could talk to you about autism more generally, although that might not make it very engaging. So what my sermon will try to do today, and likely fail, is to balance the personal and the scientific. But before we can talk about autism further, we do have to understand some basic terms besides the one that were in the story for sharing. The first is simply how we should refer to people on the autism spectrum. There are a couple of ways to do so, and different people have different preferences. A lot of activists prefer the term autistic. It signifies who we are. We are who we are because of our autism, and it is fundamental to who we are. Others, including myself, prefer to use person with autism, since I am not my autism, and it also is removed from the insult commonly used to identify someone as unintelligent. Much like pronouns, which one is preferred, or if either is even preferred at all, is likely going to vary from person to person. Another important term is stimming, or self-stimulatory behavior. It is a repetitive or unusual body movement or noise. Stimming might include hand or finger mannerisms, for example, finger flicking and hand flapping. Sometimes stimming involves unusual body movements, for example, rocking back and forth while sitting or standing. For me, I often bite my nails subconsciously, and I slightly rock back and forth, usually while sitting. Stimming usually occurs as a response to sensory overload, also known as autistic overstimulation. Sensory overload occurs when an intense or persistent sensation overwhelms a person's ability to cope. With autism, the stimulus is often environmental, such as an off-putting sound, smell, sight, taste, or texture. The stimuli can vary from one person to the next, and even one situation to the next. For me, I get overstimulated in enclosed spaces with many voices talking, different voices talking, even if not to me. And finally, masking. Masking is when someone on the autism spectrum learns, practices, and performs certain behaviors and suppresses others in order to be more like the people around them. Not because they feel natural, but because they feel forced to comply with social norms. Masking is not a healthy response to autism, but there's not really a better option available to us. As I said earlier, this month is Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month, and I'd like to take a second to explain. Autism is still not very well understood in our society. I have often been told that I am not autistic because I have low support needs. People see the exterior and assume it represents the interior. This is why we need awareness, so people stop trying to undiagnose people who are very clearly on the autism spectrum. But we still very much need acceptance. I've often heard autism used as an insult, as if my brain functioning differently just means that I'm dumb. Accepting autism means understanding that while I may be different in all sorts of ways, those differences are what make me unique, not scary or bad or evil. The Diagnostic Manual, or DSM, used to identify high and low functioning autism, which has been since retired because everyone with autism is high functioning and low functioning depending on the day and a situation. The new term refers to one of three levels of support need. I am lucky enough to have low support needs, or also known as level 1, which means I can mostly live on my own without significant help. But I have trouble understanding social rules and cues, and may not follow them at all. I also struggle with skills that some people think of a typical person of my age: cleaning the house, paying bills, or changing conversation topics away from something I care about. And I definitely need a support network that includes medical professionals and a community such as this one. Level 2 requires substantial support to live on their own. and may exhibit major repetitive behaviors, including self-harm behaviors, such as head banging, either as an escape or for sensory input. And level 3 generally cannot live on their own without an aid or other day-to-day assistance, often being unable to handle change without significant distress, or even being completely nonverbal. Which level you are can change as you age, but even people with higher support needs are deserving of our acceptance. They are just as human as the rest of us and deserve to be treated with the inherent worth and dignity of all people. That is one of our principles in Unitarian Universalism, after all. Autism is a spectrum, and a big part of awareness, the awareness side of the discussion, is understanding that the spectrum is not from not autistic at all to very autistic. The spectrum is a spectrum of strengths and weaknesses. For me, I am very good at logical reasoning, but very bad at social cues, a big reason why I'm a software engineer. Many of you have heard of the term Asperger's syndrome, and that's what I was originally diagnosed with. But another part of awareness is understanding that that term is no longer either in the official diagnostic manual nor preferred by advocates such as myself. A Nazi doctor by the name of Hans Asperger's created the term during the Holocaust. Apparently, he had identified autism in a number of his young patients who were all scheduled to be departed to death camps. He argued that some higher function children were worth saving because he believed they had a higher value to society. As a result, individuals with autism who were verbal and more likely to be able to live independently as adults were described by his definition as having Asperger's syndrome. The term was tremendously helpful to many people who were diagnosed with autism later in life and came to consider themselves Aspies. The diagnosis helped them feel like they found their home planet, their people. However, Hans Asperger's unfortunate link to the Nazi regime makes the term deeply problematic, and many autism activists such as myself reject it. The term generally preferred is autism, and someone with it is autistic. I am lucky enough to have been diagnosed at a young age. Some parents worry about labels and don't like explaining things like autism to their children. My parents told me as soon as they knew, using that very same book we used for the story for sharing today. This didn't make my life any easier than anyone else on the spectrum, but it meant that in the back of my head, whether I knew it or not, it wasn't my fault for my social difficulties. I was severely bullied in school because of my differences, which is a very common experience for people on the autism spectrum. I cannot stand here and tell you that knowing it made it at all easier or left me in a better position today than I otherwise would have been, because I'd be lying. But once I got older, around high school age, I could start more effectively communicating why I am how I am. I remember I had a problem with a substitute teacher in high school. They asked me a question, I don't remember what it was, and I answered directly and truthfully. They thought I was being sarcastic, but I wasn't. But they refused to accept that I was just telling them what they asked directly, as if it was a social norm I was missing perhaps to be a bit less direct. They got really mad about this, and I ended up having to tell them point blank that I'm autistic, and if I'm ever sarcastic, it's very, very obvious. While this stopped the issue from continuing, they forced me to out myself to the entire class, and seemed to resent me for the rest of the time they were there. I use the word out myself because while we should all be accepting of each other, I had no idea how my classmates would respond, nor did I really want to find out. Knowing my diagnosis may improve relations, help them start to understand that I'm not just socially awkward, but really a very vibrant individual once you get to know me. But I was not given a chance to safely tell people in a time and place where they weren't going to connect my diagnosis to me arguing. This reflects a problem outside of just myself. Plenty of people see autism as people who don't have emotions, or if they do, it's only really anger or rage. This is simply not true. A vast majority of us feel emotions as strongly, or even sometimes even more strongly than a neurotypical person does. The problem is we can't express those emotions in a way society has deemed acceptable. Part of masking for many individuals is suppressing our emotions, never letting anyone know how we really feel. It's not that we are unfeeling, it's that we don't feel safe, whether consciously or subconsciously, to express how we naturally need to. Part of autism awareness is understanding that while, yes, we have differences, we also have so many similarities. Just because you don't understand why we do what we do doesn't mean we do it for no reason. Many people who want to find a way to help individuals with autism find charities to support them. For autism, this is a complicated issue. The largest charity, and I am using that word in the loosest possible way, is Autism Speaks. In my opinion, and the opinion of many other autistic advocates, and yes, they are a hate group. They popularized the blue puzzle piece logo for autism, which many of us feel like represents that we are missing a piece. And more or less suggests that it is a childhood issue rather than a lifelong one. The color blue also suggests that the diagnosis largely applies to boys, which is not true, although girls and women tend to be diagnosed later in life than boys. Activists in the autism community prefer the rainbow infinity symbol, which represents the infinite spectrum that is autism. Autism Speaks promotes finding a cure, as if we are sick. We aren't sick, we are just different, and different is okay. Instead of finding a cure, they should be finding a way to better assist people who have higher support needs. One of the stories that they've promoted in a lot of marketing material is about a parent of a child of autism who is very overwhelmed and definitely needed support, but they never include any actual information on what that support may be. One story specifically promoted by Autism Speaks was a video of a mother who was in a car with her son and considered driving both of them off of a bridge so that she wouldn't have to struggle with the stress that a child on the autism spectrum may cause. All of this while her 7-year-old son was in the background of the video. While I am sure that she actually felt this way, it's not a story that ends with how she got help. It's not one that ends on a good note. The whole story is that she was overwhelmed and they used that as marketing material. The story may represent how hard it is to be a parent, how hard it can be without support for the parent, but it also has to end on a high note. Otherwise, it's just fear-mongering and harmful to the entire autism community. It's not too far different from vaccine refusers who suggest that they would prefer risk their child dying of a preventable childhood disease rather than the child possibly getting autism because of those vaccines. But there's no scientific validity to a linkage between vaccines and autism, and the original paper was revoked by the journal, along with the doctor's medical license by the British Medical Association. Autism Speaks also supports, funds, and manages so-called treatment programs that tend to be more harmful than good for autistics. One such treatment program is Applied Behavioral Analysis, or ABA, where autistic children are trained as if they were animals, to behave in a way that is comfortable to neurotypical people, effectively training them to mask. Autism Speaks also promotes a more extreme version called aversion therapy, which uses physical punishments, including but not limited to strong electric shocks, and other physical punishments meant to inflict as much pain as possible to effectively beat the autism out of children. Additionally, Autism Speaks ignores autistic voices, with no one in management or any decision level making in the entire organization being autistic. It is one of the only well-known medical organizations or mental health charities that actively ignores the requests of the group it purportedly represents. I would happily speak to you more about why you shouldn't support Autism Speaks if you approach me after the service. But there is better options if you're going to support a charity to help support individuals with autism. My personal favorite is the Autism Self-Advocacy Network, or ASAN, who's run and managed by people on the spectrum for people on the spectrum. And it was created by autistics for autistics needing all levels of support. One reason many autistics need support has to do with their experience with trauma. It may surprise you to learn that almost everyone with autism is traumatized in one way or another, and you would be hard-pressed to find an adult with autism who isn't. We need both acceptance and awareness, because that trauma comes from how others treat us. If people can identify that we are autistic and not treat us poorly, maybe the next generation of autistic children can grow up with less trauma in their lives. The trauma that most of us have, even without the traumatic treatments that some of us go to, which have a significant level of PTSD associated with them. Another reason we need greater autism awareness is because whenever you see an autistic character on TV or in pop culture, other pop culture, they're always a savant in something, often math or science. There are savant-level autistics, sure, but we aren't all the best in the world at something. Additionally, shows like The Good Doctor show a person who only ever struggles with autism when it's convenient, never needing to miss a surgery because he is overstimulated or just can't physically do something other than STEM to hope to ease his sensory overload. Another well-known story is from the movie Rain Man, where someone shakes a matchbox, and the autistic character guesses the exact number of matches, which society has taken to mean that autistics are very good at math. If I had a penny for every time I was upfront about my autism, and the response I got was asking if I was good at math, I would have 2 pennies, which I know isn't a lot, but it's weird that this happened twice. Especially since I never claimed to be good at anything other than computers. And I got to be good at computers the exact same way everyone else who was good at anything did. I learned through doing. Autism is complicated. I do not think or behave like someone without autism might think or behave, nor might they expect someone else to behave. The reason we have to have acceptance is because there has got to be a better way to have people like me in our society without forcing them to conform to a social norm that we don't understand or know. So what is my superpower? My sermon is titled, Autism Isn't My Superpower, because it may be a part of me, but it doesn't make me who I am. My superpower is being accepting of others, being forgiving even when I don't have to be, wanting to help people who have seemed to have been forgotten, and so much more. But I don't have my superpowers because I'm autistic. I have my superpowers because it's who I am and how I was raised, in part by this very church. So the question exists. What can you do? How can you make the world a better place and easier place? Not just for people with autism, but for everyone around you. For starters, you can donate to charities such as Autism Self-Advocacy Network or the Organization for Autism Research, or OAR, which are not only good for people with autism, but listen to our voice. Additionally, rather than casting someone off because you don't behave like you expect, maybe try learning more. Maybe they just are autistic, and behave like that in a way that seems rational to them, even if it's not socially acceptable. And share your superpowers with others, because I suspect my superpower is more common than you might expect. Thank you.